Let's be real. Buying or selling a home, it's one of the biggest, most stressful decisions you're ever going to make. And it's a world filled with jargon, complicated rules, and seriously high stakes. So, what are the guardrails here? What does a real estate agent have to tell you? And what can they legally keep to themselves? Okay, let's jump in and pull back the curtain on the rules every single agent has to live by.
So, to get our heads around this, let's start with a super simple analogy. Picture this. You're in a department store, you're looking to buy a suit. The kind of relationship you have with that salesperson, well, it's surprisingly similar to the two main roles in real estate. It all boils down to one single critical distinction. And here it is, the big difference. Are you a customer or are you a client? See, an agent works with a customer. They're helping you with the transaction, kind of like that store clerk. But the moment you sign an agency agreement, you level up. You become a client. And now that agent works for you. They owe you their loyalty, their full representation. Everybody else in the deal, they're just a customer.
Okay, so keeping that in mind, here's our game plan. First, we're going to start with the absolute bedrock of every deal, honesty. Then, we'll decode those for sale signs and ads you see everywhere. After that, we dive into the most important document for any buyer, tackle the really tricky subject of stigmatized properties, and then we'll wrap it all up with the key protections that you need to know.
So let's kick things off with the number one rule, the one that everything else is built on. It's this non-negotiable duty of honesty and fairness, and it applies to every single person involved in a transaction. It doesn't matter if you're a client or just a customer.
And you don't have to take my word for it. Let's look at the actual legal language. It says an agent must be honest and fair with all parties. That means even if you're the buyer and they represent the seller, they cannot lie to you, period. But, and this is a big but, look at that second part. They only owe a duty of fidelity, which is just a fancy word for loyalty, to their principal. And who's the principal? That's their client. So what's the takeaway? Honesty for everybody, but loyalty, that's reserved only for the client.
So how does this whole honesty thing actually play out in the real world? Well, let's look at something you see every single day. A for sale sign, or maybe a Facebook ad. You might be surprised to learn the rules here are incredibly specific, and it's all designed to stop anyone from misleading the public.
Take real estate team names, for instance. The Texas Real Estate Commission, or TREC, has some really clear rules on this. A team name must end in team or group. They can use words like realty, that's fine. But what they absolutely cannot use are words like company, brokerage, or associates. Now, why is that? Well, because those words make it sound like the team is its own independent business, when in reality, they're working under a sponsoring broker who's the one that's actually responsible for everything.
All right, time for a pop quiz, and this example actually comes straight from Trek. So, here we have an ad from sales agent Darth Vader. He's selling some newly acquired planets. His team is called Vader & Company, and he works for Darkside Realty.
So think back to that rule we just talked about. Take a good look at this ad. Is it compliant? Yes or no?
And the answer is a big fat no. The problem is right there in the name, Vader & Company. Remember that word, company, is on the banned list. It's totally misleading because it suggests Vader's team is its own brokerage, which it's not. It's part of his broker's firm, Darkside Realty.
Okay, let's try another one. Same deal, same property, same brokerage. But this time, Darth Vader has given himself a bit of a promotion. He's now Darth Vader CEO.
So what do you think? How about this one? Is an agent allowed to use a fancy title like CEO in their advertising?
And once again, that's a no. This is also non-compliant. A sales agent just can't use a title like CEO or president in an ad because it creates a ton of confusion. It makes it seem like the agent is responsible for the whole company, when legally, that buck stops with the sponsoring broker, who in this case is, of course, Emperor Palpatine.
All right, so we've sorted out advertising. Now let's shift our focus away from the agent and onto the property itself. We're going to talk about what is arguably the single most important document for any buyer, the one piece of paper designed to reveal a property's secrets.
It's called the Seller's Disclosure Notice. This is a form that's required by law here in Texas, where the seller has to write down everything they know about the property's condition. Now here's the most important part. The seller fills this out, not their agent. The seller is the one on the hook for its accuracy, based on what they actually know.
So what kind of dirt is on this form? Well, think of it like the property's tell-all diary. The seller has to disclose what they know about all the big-ticket items. Foundation problems, a leaky roof, if it's flooded before, any termite issues, or problems with major systems like the plumbing or electrical. The key phrase here is, they only have to tell you what they know.
But there are a few exceptions to the rule. You're not always going to get a seller's disclosure. For example, in a foreclosure, the bank selling the house probably has no clue about its history. Same thing goes for a home being sold by an estate or if it's being transferred between spouses in a divorce. These exemptions are mostly for situations where the seller just wouldn't have that personal day-to-day knowledge of the home's condition.
And this number right here, this is your secret weapon as a buyer. As soon as the seller gets that completed disclosure notice into your hands, a clock starts ticking. You typically have a 7-day window where you can terminate the contract for any reason at all and get your earnest money back. It gives you precious time to read everything over and decide if you're still in.
Okay, now for what is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting and misunderstood parts of real estate law: stigmatized properties. This is where we stop talking about physical problems like a leaky roof and start talking about psychological ones. What does an agent really have to tell you about a property's dark past?
So what makes a property stigmatized? It's when some past event makes it less appealing to buyers, even though there's nothing physically wrong with the house. We're talking about things like a murder taking place there, rumors that it's haunted, or if it was used for some major criminal activity. You know, things that just give you the creeps.
Now this is the rule that really blows people's minds. The law is crystal clear on this. An agent is not required to tell you if someone died on the property from natural causes, suicide, or an accident. The only time they have to disclose a death is if it was caused by the property's condition, like, I don't know, a faulty staircase. Now a murder? That's a different story. That's generally considered a material fact that affects the property's value, and that does need to be disclosed.
Phew. Okay, we've gone through a lot, from advertising rules to disclosures to a property's past. So how does all of this come together to actually protect you? Let's boil it all down to the crucial takeaways that really act as your shield when you're buying or selling a home.
So here it is, your 4-point shield. First, always expect honesty. It's not just good manners, it's the law. Second, really look at those ads. Check for the broker's name and keep an eye out for those misleading team names. Third, demand that seller's disclosure. It is your right. Read every line and remember your 7-day escape hatch. And finally, number 4, know the limits. Understand what agents are not required to tell you, like most deaths that happen on a property. And that really brings us to the big question that sits behind all of these rules. You know, it's all about balancing a buyer's need for transparency with a seller's right to privacy. So where do you think that line should be? How much of a home's history does a new owner really have a right to know? And at what point does it just become an invasion of the previous owner's past? It's a tough question, and it's at the heart of everything we've talked about today.